Hey guys, Sen here. Capital Peak is the hardest district in the clan capital. It's the final boss you face after clearing all the other districts, and it's supposed to take the most amount of hits to take down. However, during the course of a raid weekend, the top ranked clans in the world can take out a few max peaks in just 2 attacks. But for clans above 2,000 upgrades who face almost completely maxed out peaks, the most peak 2 shots that any other clan has ever gotten in a single raid weekend is 6. 6 peak 2s with 37% hit rate is the total from the best clans in the world from their very best raid weekends. But today, I have completely obliterated that record with 13 peak 2s with 76% hit rate at Balloon Skies, my own clan, with more than doubling the next best performance. Some might even go as far as to say that I am pretty good at attacking Capital Peak. And so today, I'm going to share with you guys some tips and tricks on how you can improve at them too. So today I'm going to be going into a lot of depth on what I'm thinking about when I am approaching the peak and planning out my attack. So this very first attack, the first thing you want to do is you look at the Capital Peak and see if there are any buildings within 1 tile distance of the peak, meaning that you can chain them down with super wizards and get so much value off of a super wizard bomb. In this case, there's a giant cannon and 2 rocket artilleries. When there are 2 or more major defenses inside the base off of the Capital Peak to be chained, that is your cue to go in with super wizards. There's also a Crusher Wizard Tower and a bunch of other little defenses, so great value. And from there, it's all about setting up the Wizard Bomb. I always go in with a Wizard Bomb on the second attack with very few exceptions. It's usually better to do on the second hit because the wizards are very fragile, very squishy. You usually need an entire attack and a full set of spells to try to set things up properly and make sure your wizards don't just get blasted by traps or any of those other big defenses on the base. And so the first hit, there are 3 major objectives that you want to achieve. The first one is you want to carve a path towards the peak, meaning you want to clear all the defenses in the way, and so you can directly target the peak on the second attack. The second objective is you want to clear as many other defenses and buildings on the base that are not within chain distance of the peak. So any building that you can't get with your Wizard Bomb, you want to be thinking if you can take that out on the very first attack, because there are a lot of defenses on the Capital Peak, not just the peak and the buildings around it, and they can ruin your attack as well. So getting down as many of those as possible on the first hit will just set you up very nicely for the bomb on the second hit. This base is actually quite easy with a ton of default ruins on the outside, and that's why we're going to start off with this base. Don't worry, there will be harder layouts later on in the video. So there should be something here for everyone, but we're going to use a pack of minions to snipe the cannon and snipe the giants over here on the first hit, and then a giant as well as an Inferno Dragon to snipe the blast bow as well as the enemy super on the left hand side. Clear any raid troops on the first hit if you can, because they're very annoying to deal with on the second hit. And then third, you want to be considering where you drop your spells. Spells in the clan capital last for 2 attacks, so it's very important that you make the best use of every single spell, because if you drop them properly on the first hit, they can usually help you out on the second attack. So where do we want to come in on this very first hit if we want to satisfy the 3 objectives? Well, we want to take out as many defenses as possible on our way to the peak. And there's an Inferno Tower, a Bomb Tower, a Crusher, a Wizard Tower. Those are all huge threats to Hog Riders and Wizards, which is usually your go-to finisher against the Capital Peak, meaning that if we can take all those out on our approach to the peak, that will be money. So we start a Sparky on the far right-hand side, snipe the Spear Thrower, snipe the Rapid Rocket. It will work in towards the cannon. This cannon is a great anchor point for me, meaning that after the Sparky finishes off the cannon, she should work her way in towards the left, exactly where we want her to go on top of the air defenses as she works her way towards the Inferno Tower. But we have to be careful. We do have a Frost down because we are covering the peak. Usually a Frost on the peak is great value for the first hit and also will get you value on the second hit. And then we do not have a rage spell for Sparky because this is something that I like to do that pretty much no one else does, which is a Pinata Sparky with a couple of Graveyard Hogs. So you have to be careful when you're doing something like this because you don't have a zap to reset the Inferno Tower. So we're making sure we use our Rams and using our Giants to ensure that the Sparky never gets locked onto by the Inferno Tower. But at this point, we've run out of tanking troops because we have a couple of Hog Riders, a couple of other troops to set up our Graveyard Hog attack. And before our Sparky goes down, we will drop down our Graveyard spells to distract the defenses on our 2 Hog Riders approach. We don't have many Hog Riders, but If we use those graveyard spells to distract for those Hog Riders and distract all those defenses that can be shooting at them, they can do a lot of damage, as you will see in a moment. As Sparky goes down, all of those graveyard skeletons start spawning. They pull some traps, and we can send a Hog Rider on top of the Tesla, stun the Tesla, as well as grab the Spear Thrower. We're making sure we don't send them into, say, a Wizard Tower or a Multi-Mortar to easily have all the Larrys quickly die out, but we can grab the Giant Cannon and grab the right side compartment, and we've taken out a lot of those outside defenses that I was talking about. We have carved a path towards the peak, and we have a Frost Spell on the peak, as well as 2 Graveyard Spells, so we have achieved basically a perfect first hit. From here, the second hit is really easy, but I actually screwed things up. We don't quite get the cannon because we run out of time, but you'll see in a moment. From here, it's just a matter of finishing things off. You always will go with a rage spell if you haven't used it on the first attack to try to get your wizards faster and blasting through all of those defenses. And then we'll use the graveyards where there are gaps inside the base, and as well as to try to tank as many of those defenses that could be shooting at my wizards as possible, especially the rocket artillery as well as giant cannon. Those are super nasty, so make sure we have a graveyard to try to tank those as well. Get some rams going to distract all those defenses, get those graveyard spells going from all different angles, a giant to tank the blast bow, and then we send the wizards straight into the giant bomb, as well as the multi-mortar snipes it down. But the wizards have gotten enough damage. They chain down the rocket artillery, they chain down the giant cannon. That was an epic fail by me, but like I said, this was a very easy peak, so we should be still able to recover from here. The frost spell on the peak is so good, so important at slowing down the peak. It makes it so that you can delay your Hog Riders quite a bit, because the Hog Riders have that stunning ability. They can stun the defenses on the approach, and we're going to take advantage of that ability to make sure the Hog Riders are all safe. But with the frost on the peak and those Hog Rider stuns, the peak pretty much never gets any shots on you, and there's just 3 Hog Riders in the bag, as well as a back section with a bunch of point defenses. We have a Larry Swarm going through the base as well, and we will fast forward from here. Even after completely goofing up the Wizard Bomb, our first hit was so successful. We set things up so nicely. We still got those chain value targets off on the peak, and we were able to get this peak down in 2 hits. So taking a look at our second peak, look at this peak and how many wizard chain targets are around it. Blast Inferno Tower, Rocket Artillery, Giant Cannon, Multi-Mortar, Rocket Artillery, Cannon, Spear Thrower, Wizard Tower, Inferno Tower, Multi-Mortar. This is one of the fattest wizard bombs I have ever seen. But of course, we're going to come in with Wizard Bombs on the second attack, and once again, we're going to come in with Sparky on the first hit. Sparky and Wizard Bombs are the 2 best tools at your disposal for peak 2 shots. If you haven't learned those and you want to get good at peaks, those are the 2 strategies that you absolutely must know. A frost ball on top of the peak, as well as a bunch of other defenses. Once again, slowing down the peak makes your Wizard Bomb a lot easier, but it'll also protect my Sparky on the approach, as well as all those big defenses, the blast bow, the rocket artillery in particular. Long range defenses that are super nasty as Sparky, slowing those down will make it a lot easier to tank all of those defenses and keep Sparky safe on the approach. Some ramps to open up walls, as well as pull traps, tank the defenses, and clear the buildings, and so we can open up the map for deployment. We're going to come in from the left-hand side of the base, because we can see that there's a crusher or 2 crushers, some cannons, some bomb towers, wizard towers, as well as this enemy super. When the enemy super is inside the base, it's the nastiest defense on the capital peak. It distracts all your troops while all those enemy defenses are firing on you, and does so much splash damage. You have to be extremely careful, otherwise it will absolutely devastate you. So if we can take that out on the first attack with this barrel and Inferno Dragon, that will be super ideal. And then we will use our rage spell. We're not dropping it yet, we're just letting Sparky slowly work her way inside and using the giants, using the ramps to tank and keep her safe. We really need to make sure that this wizard or this rage spell will cover this capital peak on the approach for my wizards to go in and chain everything down. Like I said, the spells last in the Clan Capital for 2 attacks, so making sure you get the most amount of value for every single spell. Look at these Rage Sparky Shells. It basically one-shots every single defense when it's raged up like this. Off the Multi-Mortar, chains down the Spear Thrower, chains down the Rocket Artillery in just 1 attack. The Dragon is flying over, but the Giant is distracting my Inferno Dragon, and we don't kill the enemy super because of that stinking rapid rocket range. It stays up at low HP, but it will be a lot more manageable on the second attack. We'll give the Barbarian on the far right as much time as it needs to clear all those defenses over there, but Once again, mission accomplished. We've gotten the 3 objectives. We've cleared a path towards the peak. We have our spells down, ideally, to try to get as much value on the second attack, as well as clear as many defenses that are not within chain distance of the peak as humanly possible. There's not much left after we got the Wizard Bomb down. Even though there's 9.3k left on the map, there's so many Wizard Chain targets that this is a doable finish from here. And from here, we will freeze the backside Blast Bow as well as the enemy Dragon, and a bunch of other defenses that will make my Wizard Bomb a lot more manageable. We can just sacrifice 1 graveyard spell and get a lot of value with that frost spell, especially the dragon. The dragon gets completely neutralized by the frost spell and basically will never shoot at your troops as long as they just constantly die and the dragon constantly retargets. Then we'll use a giant to tank the peak as well as blast bow from a distance, and then we'll use the rams. Notice how I use the rams towards the right side compartments. We want to open up those compartments to make sure that my rest of my rams will go inside of the base and tank all those defenses inside. So we open up the flanking compartments like so, and then the rest of my rams will be good to go inside the base. Get the graveyard spell going that we dropped on the backhand section. The graveyard, the purpose for that is to tank for any traps. So we drop them in the gaps inside the base, as well as distracting any defenses that can be shooting at your wizard. So this blast bow, this inferno tower, as well as all those other defenses in the backhand section. Notice how on my last hit, all my wizards died because I was not careful, not taking that multi-mortar. But this time, we're going to be a lot more careful. There's a lot more on the map, and this base is a lot harder to finish. 5 wizards on the peak. When there's a lot of chain targets off the peak, we will go in with 5 wizards instead of the usual 4 that you usually go in with the wizard bombs. And then those wizards do such a great job at DPSing down the peak. Even though we weren't able to get a Hog Rider to stun the peak, we were able to finish that thing off before it got a shot on top of my wizards. And now we haven't spammed in all of our Hog Riders because you usually want to keep as many Hog Riders as possible for after the peak goes down, and then you can use those Hog Riders to strategically take out buildings, keep your wizards alive as much as possible. The graveyards hopefully have taken out any traps up ahead. And then we have 1 more Inferno Dragon on this second hit after we've used some Hog Gliders to take out any air defenses in the way. And the Inferno Dragon kills the enemy super. There's just a Bomb Tower and a Blast Bow on the backside. After the Bomb Tower goes down, that frozen Blast Bow is not going to be enough to stop all of my Hog Riders as it beats through that last building inside of the base. And just like that, we've taken out a super compact peak in 2 attacks using those same principles. This is how I approach almost every single peak, and it's only going to get harder from here. So now the peaks are starting to get a little bit harder. Once again though, there was a Rocket Artillery, Blast Bow, and Giant Cannon, 3 chain targets off of the peak. So that is a signal to go in with a Wizard Bomb on the second attack. And from there, it's a matter of how we want to set up this base. This is a really kind of annoying base, but I see that there's a lot of clumped up buildings on the entry, meaning that Sparky is going to do a great job over here. And we also don't need to use a rage spell once again because all these buildings are basically one shot anyways, and we let the Sparky slowly work her way inside with a frost spell. We try to drop the frost spell so that it hits the peak as well as the rocket artillery, and then we'll have the Sparky slowly work her way inside with some giants and some ramps to try to tank on her approach. But just like on the first attack, this is a strategy that I like to use that pretty much no one else does, which is the Frostspell, Graveyard, Hog Rider, Pinata, Sparky. Kind of a wild attack, but it works for me a lot of the times. And when you know that you don't need too much tanking with your Sparky and you don't need too many spell support, you can just use the 1 spell with the Frostspell to slow everything down and make your Sparky safe on the approach with all those tanking troops. I actually missed the Rocket Artillery with the Frostspell. It's kind of a difficult frost, but it should have been possible if I actually dropped my frost properly. But the Sparky is slowly working her way inside as she chipped down all of those buildings on the approach. She'll finish off the Spear Thrower and chain down the air defense. Look at this Wizard Tower next and get a nice amount of damage on all those air bombs. The Sparky is now getting low, and so before she finally goes down, we drop down the Graveyard spells on top of all those defenses to tank for my Hog Rider's approach. This time I have 4 Hog Riders because we went really light on the tanking for the Sparky, and we didn't really bother trying to kill the Dragon or any of those other troops on the outside because we want to get those Hog Riders to push in as far as possible. We take out the Rocket Artillery, we take out the Inferno Tower, and once again, we have set up all of our major 3 objectives. The spells are really nicely placed. The Frostspell covers the peak. The Graveyards are still going to be spawning skeletons on the second attack. We have a path carved towards the peak, and we've taken out a lot of those defenses on the outside. And this point, it's a matter of trying to set things up. We use a Rage Spell leaning in the base, and we use some archers to try to snipe those final few defenses so we can directly target that peak with our wizards. The first pack of archers does get blown up, a little bit unfortunate, but the second pack grabs the giant cannon, and we are just about good to go. We'll let those graveyard spells and those Larrys inside fizzle out before we drop down our graveyards on the backhand side, where we see there are gaps inside the base, as well as try to tank the rocket artillery as well as the blast bow on the backhand section. And now it's time to go a ram or a few rams to get those graveyards going and tank those defenses on the approach. And then we'll use a barb on top of this trash hut to try to maybe grab the aggro of that peak. Perfect. And then as the peak is going to fire its first shell, we're now going to drop down the wizards, and we're going to have a lot of time with those wizards on top of the peak to chain down all of those defenses. Those Larrys from the graveyards are pulling a bunch of traps, which is perfect. And notice how I brought some Inferno Dragons. Usually capital peaks are not easy. You have to find weaknesses inside of the base and exploit them. This bottom Inferno Dragon, we use a ram to try to pull any traps. There was a Zap trap, so perfectly done there. It'll snipe the Crusher, finish off the Spear Thrower, and get some value on top of the cannon. The top side Inferno Dragon is outside of range of the Rapid Rocket. The graveyards and rams are tanking the Inferno Tower, and so we can use that Inferno Dragon to sneak in, grab that Crusher, grab that Giant Cannon. So great base identification here. And those Inferno Dragons, while the wizards chain the core, are going to help out on the flanks, taking out a bunch of defenses over there. Like I said, we are only using one Hog Rider, saving onto as many Hog Riders as possible for later on inside of the attack. And then we'll use all those Hog Riders to help push our way through towards the back-end section. The Inferno Dragon on the right-hand section is still going, finishes off the cannon. The left-hand side Inferno Dragon will go down to the Rapid Rocket. But look, that Inferno Dragon on the right is also going to help me kill those Giants that are walking towards my wizards. So absolutely insane value over there. That Inferno Dragon was so perfect. We have one last Hog Rider to help take out that Tesla. There's a Bomb Tower and a Spear Thrower left on the backhand section, and some Wizards that are still alive. There's a Giant Bomb that blows up some of my Hog Riders. The Hog Riders have just enough HP to finish off that last Bomb Tower, and it's just a matter of my Wizards that are getting sniped by the Spear Thrower, as well as a bunch of Larrys and spam working their way through. I did not drop my last Barbarian because I know I need that Barbarian to try to tank the enemy super for my Inferno Dragon to kill the enemy super and kill the enemy raid cart and finish off the rest of this base. So the Inferno Dragon is going to come in clutch at the very end. The Larrys are swarming that Spear Thrower. There are no more traps on the backhand section of the base. That was a little bit lucky on the very end, but this is a very tough base, so it was very nice to get this down in just 2 attacks. So the Larrys beat through the wall, get the Giant Post, and finish off this 2-shot. That Giant Bomb is not going to be enough to stop them. So taking a look at our very next peak, once again, we take a look at the wizard chain value. That usually dictates whether or not a peak is possible. There's a blast bow, there's a giant cannon, there is 8 air bombs, rocket artillery, blast bow, Inferno Tower, so many chain targets, a crusher as well within chain distance of that capital peak. Such great value for a wizard bomb on the second attack. So it's a matter of going through our 3 objectives to see what we can do here. So looking at the space, we see that there's a trapped entry at the very start. There's probably a ton of traps because it looks like the defender is trying to invite you to come in through the front door. But there is a rocket artillery, there is a giant cannon that is not within wizard chain distance of the peak. And so even though it looks like the attacker is baiting you in on the entrance, we're going to take them up on the challenge and go straight up the gut as we calculate every single Sparky chain against this base. A Frostbow on top of the peak, once again, on top of the blast bow, on top of the Inferno Tower, make it so that my Sparky entry is a lot more easy. And then we use a ram, wait to see if it pulls any traps, a giant bomb gets pulled, and now it is time to go. Ram up the right hand side, tank the Spear Thrower, as well as send those barbarians up the right hand side to open up the map up the left or right hand side. A giant to go in to tank all those defenses on the approach, set up the Sparky on top of this Rapid Rocket after we've opened up the map for deployment, and the Sparky is going to go to town. We once again want to use this Rage spell on top of the peak if possible to set up the Wizard Bomb, so we're not dropping it down yet. We're going to let the Sparky slowly work her way in on of the Spear Thrower. She chains down both cannons and she'll work her way inside. 2 shots will finish off that giant cannon, so 1 more shot will be enough to one-shot that thing, and the Sparky is going to keep on going. Giant will punch through the enemy Tesla that popped and got chipped down by Sparky, and Sparky is going to continue working her way in, locks onto the air defense, chains down the Spear Thrower, And with that Frost spell, we haven't needed to use the Rage spell yet because the Blast spell and the enemy peak is super slowed down at this point. And we'll use the Zap spell to reset the peak as well as the Blast spell to make sure that Sparky takes a lot less damage. And finally, once we finally work our way towards the peak, we can drop the Rage spell to cover wizards on top of the peak. We use it to help the Sparky get through the Blast spell and get through a bunch of other defenses over there as well. So Sparky is going to lock onto the multi-mortar, and actually, before the rocket shell goes down, she gets one more shell off, finishes off a bunch of defenses, gets so much damage on the enemy Inferno Tower, and notice how I saved onto a bunch of barbarians. This is another trick that I like to do if it is at all possible. A lot of the times, a dragon is close to the outskirts of the base. Once again, the dragon is one of the most threatening defenses inside the base, so taking that out on the very first attack is very nice. So you can actually pull the dragon out really far if you know what you're doing. You just continuously drop down little troops to help pull it away from all those defenses. The Blast bow has super long range, is super annoying, and now we can finally get an angle with the Inferno Dragon outside of range of the Blast bow, outside of range of the air defense, and snipe that enemy super with the Inferno Dragon. We use some barbarians to keep those giants in place, so the Inferno Dragon can also finish off those enemy giants. So huge value off of our barbs, off of that Inferno Dragon. And after that is all said and done, the stupid Inferno Dragon pathing actually works out for me, and the Inferno Dragon walks outside of range of the Blast bow and finishes off a bunch of trash buildings on the outside of the base. But once again, we are perfectly set up. Our two spells are perfectly placed for the Wizard Bomb. A path has been cleared. All those defenses on the outside of range of the Wizard Chains have all been taken down, including the enemy dragon on the backside, and it's just a matter of not messing up from here. In this case, there are a bunch of defenses on the backside, once again, that we can all frost at the same time. Bomb Tower, Multi-Mortar, and Inferno Tower are super threatening towards Graveyard Hogs, so getting those frozen up will make things a lot more manageable. Also, I'm able to cover this gate, and I know that the cannon car is actually going to walk through this gate as it tries to approach my troops, so the cannon car will also get frozen up over there, so huge bonus. And now it's time, archers, to try to snipe the Crusher, try to clear our path so we can directly target the peak from a right side angle. We'll let those archers die out before we drop down our Graveyard spell. They also finish off the Inferno Tower, so huge bonus over there. Graveyard, where we see gaps inside the base to distract the Rocket Artillery, also distract the Raid card. One more Graveyard, where we see some more gaps between the Blast Bow as well as Giant Cannon that could be bombs, as well as tank the Giant Cannon, and now it is finally time to go. We'll use some rams to get those graveyards going and tank for the Blast. So we'll use a giant to tank the enemy peak as well as the Rocket Artillery as it works its way towards the Crusher. We'll use some more rams to tank on the approach, and then it's time to go in with the Wizard Bomb to send them in, chain down all of those targets around the peak, and all of those graveyards are going. We haven't even needed to drop down a single Hog Rider on top of the peak because we timed things so nicely. One Hog Rider on the bottom hand side to kill the Spear Thrower and help push a barb through the Bomb Tower. Some more Hog Riders to help support the Wizards. Keep those things alive. The Wizards do so much damage if you're able to keep them alive. The graveyards have already probed the areas for traps, and at this point, it's just using the Hog Riders to collapse the back end section. The Mega Hit Teslas are super annoying, so we have to drop some extra Hog Riders to try to overwhelm that thing. A Barb to help chip down the enemy raid card to help take that thing out. Inferno Tower is about to go down. The Bomb Tower is the last splash defense on the base, and we have a bunch of Hog Riders still in the back. This was super overkill. Beautiful first hit. Actually, go back to that first hit if you want to see how to really tank for your Sparky, because I had a really nice Sparky entry that absolutely gutted open the base on the very first attack. And now we are entering insanely difficult territory when it comes to peak 2 shots, but we're going to go through the same exact process. There's a capital peak, and there's a bunch of chain targets. Once again, Giant Cannon, Blast Bow, Inferno Tower, Bomb Tower, and Multi-Cannon. And this time, there is also a Dragon Post. If we chain down the Dragon Post, that means the Dragon will start flying towards my Wizards across the peak, and it can actually get chained down by the Wizard Chains if it flies close enough. So not only buildings, you can also chain down enemy troops with those Wizard Chains. So that's exactly what we're going to try to do to try to save an Inferno Dragon on the second attack. So we're going to go through our 3 steps. Once again, split archers on the approach to make sure that we can open up the map for deployment, and we want to go in from the bottom left-hand angle because we see that on this approach, we get so many valuable defenses: Rocket Artillery, Giant Cannon, Blast Bow, Inferno Tower, Wizard Towers, and so many point defenses on the approach. That is a money angle to come in from with a Sparky, and no other troop will be able to push that far, so learning Sparky is also extremely important. Graveyard Hogs is never going to come anywhere close to as far as Sparky is going to push in this attack when there's 2 Rocket Artilleries and so many splash defenses facing the approach. So Sparky's going in, Giant tank on the approach. A Tesla actually pops, and that actually works out even better for me because the Tesla gets chipped down by the Sparky on the first shell, and then second shell, the Sparky will finish off the Spirit Thrower and finish off the air defense, and everything is going according to plan. Sparky is working her way up, and at this point, I can't really explain how to do this. You just have to practice Sparky enough and get good enough to make this push work. We ram up the right hand side as well as some barbs to clear some trash, open up the map for deployment, and then we'll use our rams, use our giants one at a time to make sure there's a constant stream of tanking for Sparky. Rage now leaning inside the base so we can get a Rage Sparky chain off of this wizard tower and finish off the rocket artillery. And Sparky is pushing her way inside. She lines herself up with the Spirit Thrower, Wizard Tower, multi-cannon. Boom, that all goes down. She works her way even closer inside. There's actually a second Tesla that I wasn't expecting once again, but it works out all the same. Half health the blast bow off that Rage Sparky shell. She works her way inside. Second Rage spell on top of the air bombs. Sparky chains down the giant cannon, looks towards the blast bow, will chain down a lot of HP off of that Inferno Tower, and one more barb will help chip that thing down. And now we got kind of lucky that the peak actually misses my Sparky because she pushed herself outside of peak range, and Sparky gets one last shell before the rocket artillery finishes her off and grabs the rocket artillery and just does so much damage to this base. I didn't think this attack would ever be able to two-shot the base, but at this point it could be possible. So we've cleared a path towards the base. We've cleared so many defenses along the way. But the one thing that we did not get is we did not get spells that are useful on the second attack. These rage spells at this point, we can't really use them, but we've achieved a lot of value on the first hit. The peak bomb is all set up, and it's just a matter of executing from here. Once again, if there are buildings in the way of the capital peak, we're going to use raged archers to try to pick off as many of those as possible. You want to directly target the peak because those wizards are so squishy. They can get blown up by bombs like the one you just saw if you're not careful, and you try to send them towards other buildings. So we're going to use those archers to slowly chip away through one more air defense before we start getting our graveyard spells going. Let those archers die out, and now it is time. We'll use some rams to try to tank and get some graveyards going on in between the blast bow, in between the giant cannon. A giant to go in to tank for the blast bow as well as the giant cannon. Graveyards go down, like I said, to tank all those flash defenses and inside the gaps inside the base to pull any traps. And then one more on the back end side to help my hog riders after the peak finally goes down to make sure that there's no traps between the multi-mortar as well as cannon over there, because it looks like there could be a lot of gaps over there. And now it's finally time to go. The giant's going to take the first shell from the capital peak, but notice how I don't have a frost on the peak, so I have to be extremely careful and make sure we stun that peak as quickly as possible, finish off that multi-cannon, and now it is time to go. Drop down the hog rider, because when there's no frost, the peak actually shoots extremely fast, so you have to know how to time that to make sure your wizards don't get shot at. The dragon does go down. Notice how I brought 5 wizards for this attack. When there is a dragon that you're trying to chain off of the peak, you will go in with 5 wizards instead of the normal 4. The multi-mortar goes down, as well as the graveyard on the back end side pulls a log trap, so things are going really well. Still 4 more hogs in the back. Wizards are still alive. We give them one last ram to open up the wall, as well as tank for that cannon, as well as that hog rider pulls out a giant bomb. So super nicely done there. 2 more hog riders in the back, one on the right hand side Spirit Thrower that was super exposed, and then we have 2 more for the bomb tower as well as the Spirit Thrower. And just like that, another peak 2-shot. This one was extremely difficult, but that Sparky on the first hit, calculating out all the chains, making sure that the Sparky value would just absolutely blow up the base, so there wasn't much left on the second attack after the wizard bomb was successful. And just like that, you can get some really insane wizard bomb peak 2 shots with just insane execution and really good planning. And for our final level of peak, there is not even a wizard bomb around the peak, and at this point, it's just a matter of how good you are with Sparky. When these peaks are doable and all of the buildings are clumped up for Sparky to get enough chains, these are some of the hardest ones to take out in 2 attacks, and it's just a matter of how good you are with Sparky. But there is a key weakness inside of this base, in that this 6 o'clock section is not very well guarded when it comes to air defenses. There's a Spirit Thrower, but it's not really protecting anything. And like we did earlier, we can drag this dragon extremely far out of the base by using some minions on the approach. They'll clear the trash buildings on the entry, and then they'll work their way inside, and as they work their way inside, they can actually pull the dragon out. And we'll use a frostball on top of the Inferno Tower on top of the blast bow. I'll explain that in a little bit. At this point, we just want to break apart this 6 o'clock section if possible. Once those minions start getting a little bit closer, they'll finally pull the dragon out, and we have an Inferno Dragon in the bag to try to snipe that thing. Also, we have a ram to open up the wall. Also, the ram checks for any zap traps to make sure that my Inferno Dragon is going to be safe on the approach. One more pack of minions to try to go in and try to snipe those giants if possible, but they will actually get inside of range of the Spear Thrower, which is a bit unfortunate. I was hoping that they would kill the Dragon Post or the Giant Post first before trying to lock onto the Giants, but it didn't quite work out for me. But the Inferno Dragon is still alive, and so there's a different way that we can approach this 6 o'clock section. We can use some rams, open up the walls, and pull those enemy troops closer inside of the base. A general rule of thumb, when I'm trying to use an Inferno Dragon to kill raid cart post as well as giant troops on the base that still have their post and they're wandering around, I'll use rams to tank for the raid cart and barbs to tank for the giants to hold those troops in place so my Inferno Dragon can ramp their way up. So ram to tank the cannon cart, and then we'll use barbs to tank for those giants, and that'll keep those giants in place for the Inferno Dragon to ramp up. And now it is finally time to go. We have all set up on the bottom section over here. That Inferno Dragon will finish off one last cannon before going down, and it's just a matter of using our rams, our barbs, our giants to open up the map, to tank for Sparky, and open up the walls and bring Sparky closer inside of the base. Well, like I said, I was going to explain this Frostbow. Even though we can't cover the peak, we can cover 2 Inferno Towers and a Blast Bow. Huge value. Those are some of the biggest threats to Sparky. Also, if I'm able to save onto my Rage for deeper inside the base, we will not need a second Rage anyways, and now it is time. Once my Sparky locks onto the Blast Bow, huge shot will finish off the Blast Bow. She'll lurk towards the Spear Thrower, will chain the Giant Cannon off of that Spear Thrower, and then she'll work her way inside. We only have a couple more tanking troops because we had to invest so much on the 6 o'clock section, but Sparky locks on the Tesla, finishes off so many defenses, and was able to actually get one more shot before going down on top of that Inferno Tower, chaining so many buildings, half healthing that Blast Bow, and we are looking so solid. Now, at this point, it's just a matter of can we finish what's left on the base. When I'm going in with a Sparky 2-shot against a corner peak with 2 Sparky attacks, I almost always use a Frost on the peak. Even though there's not really any other major threats to freeze, it's almost always great value because the peak just gets slowed down so much and is so much more manageable. So we'll drop down the Frostbow at the very beginning so we don't forget. And then we'll use the Sparky on top of this multi-cannon. So much chain value off of here. Then the Sparky will go on top of this Inferno Tower. I will not use rams because I don't want the ram to kill the Inferno Tower. I want the Sparky to lock on, finish off the Blast Bow, and then work her way down towards the other Inferno Tower. So huge Sparky chains at the very start. Sparky locks on the Inferno Tower, will finish off the Blast Bow. And this is where things go wrong. So Sparky actually pats her way up because the giant finishes off the bottom Inferno Tower over there. And now Sparky is going AWOL. We zap down the multi-mortar to make sure Sparky can go away from the peak if possible. But Sparky wraps back inside and she's going AWOL. Things are not going to plan, so we use a Hog Rider. We use an Inferno Dragon to snipe the peak if possible. The peak does get a shell off before we get the Hog stun, which is so unfortunate. Now we're going to rage into the base on top of the air bounds, finish off the bomb tower. Sparky locks onto the cannon. She'll finish off the Tesla. Sparky is getting locked onto by the peak, but she runs just out of range. The ram actually pulls a zap trap that would have killed my Sparky, so thank goodness for that. The Inferno Dragon melts through the enemy peak. Sparky finishes off the Spear Thrower off the Crusher, will slowly finish off the Crusher, and now it's up to the back section. Oh goodness, I screwed up. I was too late on the giant. Sparky gets locked onto, but she has just enough HP to kill the giant cannon before finally going down. Sparky has blessed me today. The Hog Rider survives at 0 HP as well and is working through the enemy rocket artillery. The giant sneaks into the dead zone as well. We use our last barb now to clear some trash buildings, and we have done it. Everything went wrong on this first attack, but that Inferno Dragon trick on the first hit to kill all those raid troops, as well as insane Sparky chains, insane spell value. Even though those spells weren't as useful on the second attack, the Rage was still useful, the Frost wasn't as useful. We were still able to get this peak down when everything went south. And we'll fast forward from here as we finish off our last peak 2-shot. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video and you learned a thing or two about Sparky and Wizard Bombs when it comes to peak 2-shots. Those are the two most important strategies to learn if you're trying to get good at high level capital peaks. But don't forget, we actually have a creator code on this channel now. If you want to support me with any of your purchases, you can type in "send" in the shop before any of your purchases. And also make sure you join our Clan Capital Discord community down in the description below. But like and subscribe if you enjoyed today's video, and take care.